It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
It changes from agent to agent, so the first agent tries, market says no, the listing expires, and then the vendor moves on to the next agent, and so forth and so on, sometimes not changing their vendor expectation. I mean, there's a very famous story about a house in Haberfield that has been up for sale at one point or another over the last 10 years.
And that is Michelle from Sydney on the Real Estate Breakfast this morning as we launch into another episode with more property info coming your way. A brand new week connecting you to the largest real estate podcast library across Australia every morning. Let us know too where you are listening to us from. Our email address, as always, is myrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. Hope your weekend was a good one. Well, I hope that it is enough to get you through this coming week. It is a Monday, June the 23rd today. Sydney's real estate market is flashing warning signs with a sharp rise in stale listings now clogging up the city's property pipelines. Now, we were talking about the Melbourne market with relation to this on Friday. According to SQM research, homes sitting unsold for more than 6 months jumped nearly 30% year on year in May. And experts say the culprits are unrealistic vendors clinging to outdated price expectations. You combine that with rising buyer caution, and Sydney is now leading the nation in old stock. And you'll know this if you've got a property that has been sitting for some time. It is revealing a deeper story about affordability, investor regret. We'll talk about that in just a moment, and a possible shift in market power. Let's right now catch up with Michelle May. She is a buyer's agent in Sydney. And good morning to you, Michelle. Welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast. Quite a lot going on in Sydney at the moment.
Oh, it's never a dull day in real estate. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, never a dull day, that is for sure. So let's just have a look at the Sydney sellers refusing to face reality. Many Sydney homeowners are just refusing to budge on their asking prices, even as demand softens. These unrealistic expectations, now they're prolonging the time homes spend on the market. Some properties are sitting there for over 6 months, and that's got to hurt.
Oh, absolutely. Because obviously, it takes time to sell a property anytime, a 4-week auction campaign, then 6-week settlement. But if it turns into, 6 long months, that means you're effectively putting your whole life on hold.
Yeah, and let's talk about the off-plan buyers. They're now also struggling to sell. It's the Sydney apartment market, particularly properties bought off the plan several years ago, that is seeing a harsh reckoning. And what are you seeing in that space from a buyer's agent point of view?
Oh, look, we do see that day to day. We obviously watch listings very carefully, and what we're seeing in that, particularly that higher density locations around Sydney, the newer and, newish properties are really struggling, because I always liken it to buying a new car. As soon as you drive it off the forecourt, it actually loses a percentage in its value straight away. And I don't think most property buyers realize that when they're going for the shiny new off the plan properties marketed to them.
Yeah, actually, just on the car thing, I'll tell you what I do with cars. If buying new, what I do is I hold the car for 10 years because you're going to not lose as much money, and it's almost like, the 10-year cycle of property.
You're spot on there. So the people that are really struggling the most, what we're looking at is when they bought it like 4 or 5 years ago, because the cost of acquisition here in Australia, and Sydney in particular, is so high. And then when you add on things like conveyancing and, stamp stamp duty, the vendors tend to want to add on the costs that they had when they bought it, plus a bit extra on top because they're going, well, prices have gone up over that period of time. But what they don't realize is that actually they overpaid when they bought it and they haven't caught up long enough. So you're absolutely right. You really need to hang on to it for a much longer period of time if you are wanting to buy new or off the plan.
How sort of affected are people, do you think, in terms of they've got the pain on an apartment? Maybe they could it for the same money that they paid for it when they initially bought it. Maybe they lose money. But what does that do in terms of sentiment moving forward and buying more new stock from this cohort of people that have already done that? So they're kind of in the lane of being prepared to buy off plan, where not everybody kind of has that mindset. So it must affect the market somewhat.
Well, it does. And particularly if you take into consideration that a really large proportion of these newer buildings that are, say, less than 10 years old have major building defects and, seriously high strata levies and things like that. So I think that is probably one of the reasons why these people are selling sooner rather than later. I actually have had many clients who have come to me and bought off the plan, and they're like, we need to get out because we can hear our neighbors going to the bathroom. We have been slapped with special levies and we can't afford, $2,500 a quarter on our apartment, if not more. I think one lesson learned for many of those, I think that they will not buy new or off the plan again, I would say. So you mentioned this before, buyers are becoming much more savvy when it comes to these new properties. There have been many buildings in the media. I can show you many, many more that never made the media that really people should not even be considering buying into.
Okay, they get burnt with the apartment. They might then say, well, I don't want to hear the neighbour flushing the toilet next door. I want to get into a house. They might have been in a house previously. Do you know of people where they've said, right, to heck with this, we've lost money on the apartment. We can't now afford to buy a house in Sydney because it's too expensive. We've got to move regionally and get out to an area where we can afford a house.
Oh, absolutely. So what we are already seeing is that with our clients, for example, people migrated from the eastern suburbs to the inner west, and you saw a sharp rise there in prices. And now that is sort of migrating down to the St. George area and to the Sutherland Shire. And great thing is, with the improvement of public transport, the metro, etc., things are getting easier to get into the CBD if you have to. But of course, still people are working part-time from home, maybe full-time from home. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that migration further away from the CBD.
We are talking to Michelle May. She is a buyer's agent there in Sydney. When we come back, we're going to ask the question about the agent dilemma. Win the listing at all cost and then manage the expectations. We'll talk about that after this.
Stay ahead of the competition with the latest news, insights and data analysis on the Property Podcast that keeps you informed. We are just as addicted to property as you are. The Real Estate Podcast.
It is a Real Estate Monday. Michelle is with us this morning on the Real Estate Breakfast. And I want to get to this question about the agent dilemma. They go in trying to win a listing. The vendor, the owner, turns around and says, well, this is my sell price. The real estate agent says to herself, well, that's not really what the market value is right now. But they say, yes, we'll do it for that price, knowing full well that it's too expensive. But they're playing the long game here, Michelle. And of course, after a period of time, the vendor comes to their senses and the property eventually sells.
Well, that's what you would hope, but we're seeing more and more properties actually in our areas where it changes from agent to agent. So the first agent tries, market says no, the listing expires, and then the vendor moves on to the next agent. and so forth and so on, sometimes not changing their vendor expectation. I mean, there's a very famous story about a house in Haberfield that has been up for sale at one point or another over the last 10 years. And every time comes up with an agent, it's about $1 million more than what its market value is. So it's a tricky one, but obviously the agent should be informing the vendor, these are the comparable sales, this is what your property is worth, and this is how we can list it accordingly. When they're trying to, what they call buy the listing, get the vendor to sign an agency agreement. I think that is due to the very competitive market, that they're in when it comes to sales agents. It's very cutthroat, and then some agents do exactly that. They manage the vendor's expectations whilst the property is for sale.
Yeah, and the vendor themselves, if they realised that they were being managed by agents, and that is exactly what it is, they are being managed. If they realised what was going on, they might sort of come to their senses or go with an agent that says, look, I cannot take that listing because that is miles over the price point, But as you say, it's all very cutthroat, and this is the environment that we live in. I want to go back, though, to that property that you said that has been on the market. So for 10 years, this property has never sold.
No, that's right. So it's been on and off the market, off market, on market with various different agents. It's hilarious, actually. But I don't know why any agent would be prepared to take them on. But yeah, I mean, I guess in the vain hope that maybe a buyer shows up who is prepared to pay that premium. I'm not sure. That would be a question for the vendor, I guess.
It's not a serious vendor. What the vendor's got there is a fishing rod over the side, and, they're just fishing. They're in no hurry to sell, and they know that appreciation is there. After 10 years, that property has gone up. Let's talk about underquoting, because I know that this is a favourite subject of yours. Underquoting, it's part of the industry. All sorts of things going on at the moment where people are suffering fines for it. And then you've also got the illusion of underquoting. How much of a problem is this for you?
We see it on a daily basis, really, and it's been going on for as long as I've been a buyer's agent, which feels like some days like the beginning of time. But it's not really an issue that has been dealt with in the past seriously. Still now, not enough is happening to really protect, the buyers out there, the consumers out there who are being led up garden paths, lose time out of the market because they're chasing the wrong properties, spend money on solicitors, strata inspection reports, building and pest reports, chasing a pipe dream. These agents are getting away scot-free time and time again.
Yeah, no, that's a big one. All right, we'll wrap it up there, Michelle. Enjoy your Monday. Thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast. And it's definitely keeping us all on our toes when it comes to the Sydney property market.
Thank you so much for having me.
From first-time home buyers to seasoned investors to breaking property news, discover the stories behind the real estate.
I think it's an enormous boost to their esteem, to their ability, their capabilities. The first one is hard to get, and once you get it, it's great. But when you get that next one or subsequent ones, it does say that you've got a strategy that's working and that you've planned for. And yeah, it's a great feeling.
In that the property sold out in under 2 minutes. In fact, it was sold in 1 minute, 58 seconds. I think I've explained this before. Sales start from as little as 2,000 dirhams.
All of the units, houses sold, and you add up all the money divided by the number of dwellings, we now are over $1 million.
We've got larger blocks of land, suburbs like Mount Annan, which are close by as well. So suburbs like Currans Hill and Mount Annan, I feel have got great homes on great blocks of land.
Every single market is always different. They're never the same. And it was paper-based back then. It wasn't electronic. The whole industry has changed.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.